anybody other than perhaps the ease maybe of the clerk in calling up a case or something to that effect. And so what I find to be particularly helpful are those judges that, number one, if you know the case is going to be set for a trial or it's going to ask for a continuance, if you would allow the parties to do that in advance through writing, through email, through fax, that type of thing. And many judges do, and I think that's quite effective. Secondly, if they come into the courtroom, I find it effective if many of the judges will run through the trial docket or ask people that have something very short to allow them to come up and be addressed first to kind of clear out some of the courtroom. And frankly, in those cases in which I'm a litigant or a party, and I have something that's a hearing of some nature, often I'll suggest to the judge is to, why don't we go last, because it's going to take a little bit of time, and you have a courtroom full here of people that have time concerns as well, and so we often will try to take those cases towards the end. So I think it's important to try to manage your docket in that regard through those various things of doing some advanced continuances or advanced trial setting, that kind of thing. Often we have courts where you'll have the judicial assistant in the courtroom, and if someone's going to set the case for trial, they will just approach the judicial assistant before really the court has even started, and they can set the case for trial with her, and then they can be excused, and the case will be addressed later. So I think there's various things that you can do, but I can tell you often, even from the public defender, from the defense attorney, from the prosecutor's point of side, I think really it's important that we often are coordinating hearing dates, hearing times. Sometimes I see that that's not done, and frankly I think it causes trouble for all the parties, so I think it's real important that we try to communicate as much as possible. I think the open communication is key, and fortunately I think that that's something that I've been able to address with all the various parties that I litigate with, that we have open lines of communication. We may not agree with each other 100% of the time, but certainly we communicate with each other. And I try to make it a practice. I was taught very young when I first got out and started my first job, is that basically if someone calls you, to try to call them back within 24 hours. And frankly, I do that, and I just make it a practice and try to teach the interns. We have various interns assigned to the AG's office, and I've been tasked with being the coordinator for those interns. We usually have 3 third-year law students every semester with us, and so I try to pass on those little things like returning telephone calls within 24 hours, because that's just common courtesy and decency, and so it's those little things I think that make a difference as far as trying to move things along, move a docket along, and be efficient so that nobody's wasting their time.
I think in vetting people, and you were talking about you doing it, the things you look at, we have learned over the years that obviously your references are the people that are going to blow about you.
Right.
So where we usually go first are your adversaries,
sure,
opposing counsel. And I think, pry and prod as we may, we've been absolutely unsuccessful finding any of your adversaries to say anything bad about you. One, that you're a man of humility, and one that you're honest. Your word is your bond. And I think that's rare. And I know, with the humility, you're not really going to be the one that's going to be saying this, but I think different people have vetted you the number of times that you've been here, and every opponent that we've ever contacted has nothing but glowing to say about you as well as well.
That's good to hear, and frankly, I don't believe that there's any reason to be otherwise than that. I mean, we are a litigious society, and I understand that, but I think pretty much everybody I've ever worked with on the other side of the aisle will say, look, this is nothing personal. We all have our jobs to do. We zealously represent our clients, but it's certainly no room for any type of personal attacks or anything in that regard. And frankly, I've been very fortunate in the people I've prosecuted even are good and decent people that make bad decisions sometimes. And so I've been very fortunate not having to. Probably in the 16 years, I could probably count on one hand people that were seen to be evil. Those were people that enjoyed hurting people and hurting children for the sake of hurting children. But other than that, by and large, everybody that I've ever prosecuted have been just decent people that made bad decisions. And so, again, we don't take it personally. And one thing I try to do with virtually, and I'm fortunate in my regard, usually the state attorney's office, and perhaps can't always do this, but in my cases, I generally try to talk with all the individuals that I prosecute before we resolve the case. We try to sit down, and because I think, number one, I think it's good for them and their success in the long run to meet with the prosecutor, hear the other side, do what they can to help themselves out. I think it's kind of catharsis for them. But more importantly, I get to know a little bit about them, because I think it's important to keep in mind these people we're prosecuting, they have families too, they have lives, and it's not just a name on a piece of paper. And so I try to keep that in mind as we prosecute them, and keep that in mind, balance also with the safety of the population and the community, that type of thing.
I have one more question.
Yes, sir.
Just because I don't know, I'm a CPA, what's the Prudential Able Productivity Board?
Basically what that is Prudential, the insurance company, basically what they do is they look for areas of government in which they find efficiency, and they try to zero in and give yearly awards to all different types of government, not just in the judicial system, but also, you know, in the county, legislature, everywhere. And whenever they can find some real efficiency, they try to recognize that efficiency. In that particular case, I think there's 2 Prudential awards on there. One of which was a gentleman that was basically running a charter school, and he would set up this charter school. He would identify various kids through social security numbers, and then even though these kids never came to his school, he would bill the state government, who would then basically send him returns and send him checks for the enrollment of these children that never attended his school. And the bottom line is he ended up bilking the state government out quite a bit of money doing that. And so that was one thing we tried to put a stop to very quickly and go back and trace back. He's in prison, and that was one of the awards. The second award was a guy named Thomas Salvati, who was a guy from New York that was a long-time con man, and basically had gone from crime to crime throughout his life of basically stealing from people through one scam or another. And his most recent scam, after serving prison time here in Florida for a scam in South Florida, he got out, and he got into like what they call a halfway house down in Kissimmee, where he basically started bilking people. It was when the big height as far as all the properties were being sold, and he would offer all these properties for sale, and he would take deposits and take money and give contracts and all that type of thing. The only problem is he had zero interest in any of these properties that he was selling. In fact, he was so convincing that one of the lieutenants in the halfway house through the Department of Corrections ended up buying a house from him. So here she is in the Department of Corrections buying a house from an inmate. You know, it makes you wonder, but nevertheless, the bottom line is we charged him with racketeering. He had his wife and some other people helping him, and that's just how he made his living. He drove a stretch limousine, he took high dollar vacations at resorts and things, all on the people's money that he built them from. So that was another one that, as soon as we found out about it, I worked with FDLE, and we investigated, prosecuted pretty much all very quickly. And within 6 months, we had that case from just the initial complaint all the way to him having been convicted of racketeering, and had gone through that entire process in a 6-month period of time and tried to stop the bleeding of all these properties. And so that's one of the things in which the Prudential company recognized as being a model of efficiency, of being able to stop that so quickly. And so that's what that was. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Good to see you.
All right, you as well. Thank you.